If you have your Bibles with you this morning, open up to the book of Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5, we'll start reading in verse 21. Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 21. You have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment." But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, "You fool," will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your gift at the altar and remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go first to be reconciled with your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. Over the past 3 weeks, we've been talking about walking in the teachings of Christ. And the whole Sermon on the Mount is teachings of Christ. We're going to go pretty quick throughout the teachings that we find here in the Sermon on the Mount, because I want to, on another series of lessons, take each of these individually and talk about them. Jesus in most of the sermon just gives little snippets, small little things that you shouldn't do this. But when we look at the teaching of the apostles, and that's who Jesus is teaching here, isn't it? The apostles. And during the teaching of the apostles, they go into a little bit more detail. They spend a great time with Jesus, a great amount of time with Jesus. And they learn many things. And after his death, as they went out into the world that was known at the time, they were teaching what? What Jesus had taught them. And so we're going to elaborate in the next series of lessons upon these teachings that Jesus taught his apostles, and see how it was taught throughout the New Testament. Anger. Being mad at somebody. Have you ever been mad at somebody? Oh, have you ever been so mad your face just turns beet red, the veins in your neck stick out? Have you ever been that mad? Sure you have. What good did it do you? Did you feel better afterwards? Probably not. Could you have killed the person? Probably. I was teaching a new life behavior class in federal prison one time. And we were talking that night about anger. And we were talking about Jesus and his life, and especially his death, as he was being paraded around the streets, beaten, and then finally somebody walks up to him and spits in his face. I can't think of anything more gross than a person spitting in my face. I looked at one of the inmates sitting on the front row, and I was out here talking to and walking around, and I said, "What would you do if somebody spit in your face?" He very nonchalantly looked up at me and said, "I would probably kill him like I did the guy to get in here." I walked back around. I stood behind the pulpit the rest of the time that night. Anger makes us do some crazy things, don't it? What does it do to our body? We get so angry that an enzyme is let go in our stomach. It's an acid. And it can burn holes in the walls of our stomach. Our blood pressure goes up. Many people have had a heart attack or a stroke when they've been so angry. Did that do them any good, or did it do them harm? It did them harm. We need to learn how to control our anger, don't we? We need to learn how to not hold grudges, don't we? Think how much better life would be. Our own lives, the lives of others, if we could get rid of that anger. Again, what does that anger do to us? It doesn't do anything good for us, but it does stuff that are detrimental to us. We murder. When we murder, we're liable to judgment. If we're angry with our brethren, we're liable to judgment. If we insult our brothers, we're liable for judgment. What's it going to do for us? A judgment. I don't believe what's being talked about here is the judgment of this world, but the judgment when we stand before God and have to confess to Him our sins, our thoughts, our anger. Have we tried? Have we tried? Sometimes it's hard to let go of, isn't it? Sometimes it's very hard to let go of. I know. Been there, a guy that I thought was a friend of mine. Talk bad about me. Could you imagine somebody talking evil of me? I could have at that time. Who said some bad things about me. And I got word of it. He was a friend of mine in college. We had already gotten out of college when I found this out. I've never seen him again since. But when I first found out, for days, I was mad. For days, my blood pressure was sky high. And I thought, if I could just see him. Back in those days, I got justice with my fist. If we would have had, as Mom said, a knockdown, drag-out fight. I still haven't seen him. But if I see him today, I'd walk up and shake his hand. It don't mean that I have to like what he did. But I've got to forgive him. I can't keep that inside. I can't keep that boiling up and just waiting for one day when I see him, what's going to happen. But that's the way it is with us in our lives. Sometimes that's a thorn in our side, isn't it? We have to learn how to do what? Forgive. We need to learn how to forgive. Now, I know there are some who say that we don't have to forgive unless we're asked for forgiveness. But I ask in Acts chapter 7, who asked Stephen to forgive him, but yet he asked God to forgive them as he was being stoned? Who asked Jesus to forgive him upon the cross? Nobody that I know of. But yet he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus could have been angry, couldn't he? But he wasn't. He asked God to forgive them. If we have something against the brother or sister, what do we need to do? Need to go to them. Talk to them in a calm, mannered way. If they accept it, fine. If they don't, then we go our way. I think of Paul and Barnabas. Paul didn't like that Barnabas was leaving him midway through the mission that he was taking. They separated. Didn't talk for a while. Everything calmed down. And then what were they able to do? They were able to get back together and teach Christ again. But what does it start with? It starts with forgiveness. It starts with self-control. Can I control myself? Jesus continued on in this teaching talking about lust. If you lust after a woman, then you've already committed adultery in your heart. Lust is a big word, and lust covers a lot of things. Jesus was talking about it covering, at this time, a man looking upon a woman and lusting after her. Creating in his mind an image of what he would like to happen. It could go the other way around too. What should our mind be? Our mind should be pure. Our mind should be holy. And as Jesus was teaching his apostles to keep their minds that way, he's also teaching you and I to keep our minds that way. But we can, like I said, we can lust after many things. We can lust after money. We can lust after time. We can lust after things. Those things we lust after. What's going to happen to them when we leave this world? They're going to stay right here. I saw a cartoon the other day. A father was standing by his garage and had the door opened up to his garage, and inside that garage was everything you could think of. And he was looking at his son. He said, "Son, one day all this is going to be yours." Not only did he have good stuff in there, but he had a bunch of junk too. One day when we die, all the stuff that we lusted after is going to stay right here for somebody else. All this stuff that we needed or thought we needed and wanted, and that took us away from worshiping with God, that took us away from spending time with God and our family and doing the jobs that we had with the church and with our families. Many of the things we never used, but we just had to have them. You've heard it said that you shall not commit adultery, but I say if anyone who looks upon a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And I believe that's true with people. and with things as we strive to go through the journey that we go through here upon this earth. The next bit that he talks about is divorce and remarriage, or divorce. We talked about that in class a few weeks ago in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. We also read about it in Matthew chapter 19, and those will be the two verses that we're going to be looking at when we go into this a little bit further. But he says here, if it was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the grounds of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, we switch that around too, don't we? A woman divorcing her husband. Last I heard, over 50% of the marriages in America end in divorce. And I know that in my premarital counseling, I talk to young people about divorce. And I talk to them about God's instructions to us on marriage and what God expects in a marriage. And after doing all that, I'll look at the wife, I'll say, now, if you come home one day and you and your husband have a big fight, what are you going to do? She says, I'm going to go home to mom and dad. That don't work. That don't work. Sheila and I got married. I was about 900 miles from my parents, and she was about 300 away from hers. We must, as Christians, work out the problems that we have in marriage. And not just get divorced for, well, we can't get along. We can get along if we put God in our marriages. It's not easy all the time, is it? It's not easy all the time. You know, sometimes we go back up to anger, don't we? Sometimes we get angry. What happens when we get angry? Here's another thing about anger. We say things that we really don't mean. Have you ever wanted to reach out and grab your words and put them back in your mouth? I think if we're all honest, we have. Can you do it? Not one thing that I've said this morning can I take and put back in my mouth. Number one, it's all being put on YouTube. But number two, every one of you have heard it. And you know what I've said. Many times in family life, we say things that we really don't mean and that we never should have said. We'll talk later on God's sights upon divorce, marriage, and remarriage, and what the scriptures say about that. Then in verse 33, again, as you have heard that it was said of those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, neither by heaven or by the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the great and the great King. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say simply yes or no Anything more than that comes from evil. Since my days of being a preacher, I've been asked several times to go to court with families over many different things. I've been asked to go to court to try to keep alcohol not legal to sell in Hardin County. And each time I ask the judge beforehand, and the one who brings you in, and what the courts call swearing you in, I always ask, can I be affirmed and not sworn? And they've never turned me down. Let your yeas be yea and your nays nay. In one of those times when I asked that, the lawyer from the other side that I was going to get to be a witness against, their lawyer stood up and said, Your Honor, I know this man, and I know what he says will be the truth. He does not need to be sworn in or affirmed. He will tell the truth. As Christians, we need to, if we promise something, we need to do it. Don't make an oath. Especially on God. If we make a promise to Him, let's keep that promise as to anyone else. In verse 38, you have said that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, then turn the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have the cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. Have you ever thought of a way you could get even with somebody? I've sat there many a day, and what can I do? What can I do to hurt that other person as much as he hurt me? And now that I'm old, you know what I figured out? There's nothing I can do to hurt him more than he hurt me if I retaliate against him. Because that'll just hurt me more. Again in our life and in retaliation, what are we really doing? We're not forgiving. We're not forgiving the one who went against us. We're staying angry against what they have done. And finally, the end of the chapter, starting in verse 43, we're told to love our enemies. You know what hurts somebody that's done something to us the most? Is when we forgive them. And when we don't retaliate, when we just simply look at them and say, I love you. When we say I love you, it usually makes somebody happy, doesn't it? But when we tell our enemies that we love them, they look at us and they think, why? Why would you love me after what I did? But you know what? Today, God still tells me that He loves me, even though I'm a sinner. Even though I go against what He's taught and do things that I know that I shouldn't. And I'm not bragging in any way, shape, or form. I say that with the humblest of hearts as I beg the forgiveness of God. But He still loves me. He still sent His Son to forgive me of those sins if I will just have a change of heart, a change of way, and live for Him. Jesus has given us a lot of good stuff, isn't He? A lot of good stuff that we need to study, that we need to learn, that we need to use in our life to strive to be like Him. We can't turn a blind eye or a deaf ear to the teachings of Jesus. We've got to open our eyes and we've got to open our ears. We've got to learn so that we can live the way that we should. We always want to offer an invitation when we come together. We've got to do so at this time. If anyone needs to respond, do so as we stand and as we sing.